Archaeologists excavating a Roman site in Suffolk in the east of England unearthed a mysterious shallow grave. 4 skeletons lay stacked unceremoniously on top of one another. Several of the bodies bear traces of terrible injuries.
1, if not 2, if not all of the bodies have suffered attempts at decapitation.
It does look as if she did have a neck cut and that her head was lolling to one side when she was put in the grave.
Is this a brutal case of multiple murder or a sacrificial killing? How could such an apparently savage act be committed against the relatively civilized backdrop of Roman Britain? Archaeologist Martin Brown is used to tackling ancient murder mysteries. He's investigated the deaths of medieval knights in England and Celtic warriors in France. He has now come to Suffolk to unravel the chilling mystery of the 4 inhabitants of the shallow grave.
These 4 skeletons are going to send me on a journey into Suffolk's past. We can use the archaeology of the site and its surrounds, and those clues will help us to build up a picture of their lives and of their apparently violent deaths.
Violent deaths, which could elucidate our perception of life in the early days of Roman Britain. The beautiful countryside and villages of rural England have an air of peace and tranquility. However, this was once the scene of a horrific mass murder. 4 people were brutally slaughtered and their bodies dumped in a shallow grave. The grave was discovered in this remote quarry, about 170 kilometres northeast of London, on the outskirts of the village of Flixton, near the east coast, a place where Roman settlement flourished. Martin Brown has travelled to the scene of the crime to begin an investigation into these mysterious deaths.
Somewhere near here is the scene of a particularly violent crime. Back in the early days of Roman Britain, a family group appears to have been savagely attacked and hastily buried in a shallow grave. But what's interesting is that 2 of them appear to have been decapitated, and the 3rd one's got a very savage blow to the back of the head. It really does make you wonder what's going on. So, Stuart, is this where our bodies were found?
Yes, just ahead of us here.
Martin has come to meet county archaeologist Stuart Bolter. He was the man who led the dig that uncovered the skeletons. They explore the quarry to find the exact site of the grave.
So here we are on the edge of the quarry. Where were the bodies discovered?
Well, just about where we're standing now. It's since been sort of graded down again, but the pit into which the grave was excavated was just about here.
The bodies were found by chance as the routine dig was drawing to a close.
Well, we were excavating what we thought was a large Roman rubbish pit, sort of shoveling out the material, not sort of digging it in the traditional sort of careful archaeological manner that you'd think of. And the shovel hit upon a lump of bone, which quite clearly was the top of a skull, a human skull. So we then started digging more carefully, lowering the whole area of the pit, and it quickly became apparent that we were dealing with a very strange burial. The one skull turned into 2, and then 3, as you can see in this photograph.
Oh, yes.
And then finally into 4. There's a 4th body below this.
This last body, the one that's gone finally into the grave, that's been thrown in with very little ceremony, that, you know, you can see the way the legs are splayed and the arms are... That's just turfing into a hole, isn't it?
It is, and in fact, just turfing them into the hole on top of another body that had been just thrown in beforehand. I mean, it's very unceremonial.
The unusual nature of the grave immediately aroused the suspicions of the archaeologists.
The fact that they are in such a strange position, and it does seem that they've just been thrown in, it does make you wonder what was going on at the time.
Martin makes his way to the town of Bury St Edmunds, 56 kilometres from Flixton, where the skeletons are now stored. Archaeological remains from all over the county are stored in these vaults.
And is this the main store?
Forensic expert Sue Anderson locates the boxes containing the bones that Martin is keen to examine in detail.
Oh yes, 16 human bones. Right.
Close forensic examination of the bones will help him to begin to piece together the facts behind this mysterious killing. Martin and Sue carefully arrange two of the skeletons on a table for inspection. The bones have to be laid out in the correct anatomical position. It's like assembling a 2,000-year-old human jigsaw. The age at time of death can be determined by examining the wear of the teeth and the fusion of the bones. Of the 4 victims, there are 3 adults and 1 teenager. Martin and Sue focus their attention on the 2 most complete skeletons. The skeletons that might provide the most clues.
So Sue, who have we got here on the table?
We've got a middle-aged female, this one, and a middle-aged male, that one.
The best way to determine the sex of the individuals is by studying the shape of the pelvis.
Indicators, and this is the woman.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got a very wide, this is called the sciatic notch in the pelvis. The male is much more narrow.
Oh, that's the difference, yes.
There's also evidence that the people in the grave might be related.
There's a possibility based on a few congenital traits that we've noticed, like, for example, this occipital bun.
Oh, that's very pronounced, isn't it?
An enlargement at the back of the skull, and the same can be seen in this individual.
Oh, yes. Gosh, that's very clear, isn't it?
These unusual bony lumps on the back of the skulls could be a genetic trait common to a family group. These could certainly be members of the same family. Are there any other clues that would indicate how they died?
Both of these examples, we've got cuts through the neck vertebrae.
So where's the evidence for actually it being cut?
This line here.
A slice taken off the top of the bone.
The other one's slightly better.
Is that this one?
That's that one, yeah. It's
Oh, crumbs.
clearly sliced,
Isn't it?
and the front of it's disappeared.
So those are the ones right up at the top here, is that right?
Yeah, it's about the 3rd or 4th down.
And done with something
Pretty sharp.
presumably very sharp,
Yeah.
yes.
The injuries show no sign of healing, confirming that these were either the death blows or made immediately after death. One of the women was decapitated, and the other had also suffered a horrific head injury.
Who are we looking at
This
here?
is another middle-aged female, and in this case, there's a head wound, again unhealed.
Any indication of which direction the blow would have come from here?
It would have to have come from this side. It would have come in like this.
A large chunk of the woman's skull had been cleanly sliced off with a sharp-bladed instrument.
So the blow's come in there and it's ripped away a whole piece of bone here. That's horrible.
The horrific injuries on the skeletons give a fair indication as to the cause of death. What Martin has yet to find out is who the victims were and what possible motive there was for their murder.
The bones present us with a real mystery, but to give them some sort of context, I need to talk to an expert in the history and archaeology of Suffolk.
Martin has come to Ipswich Museum to get some background on the burial. Here he meets Jude Pluvier, an archaeologist specializing in Roman Britain. She will be able to give him an idea of what was going on in this area at that time. The first thing he wants to know is whether or not this savage murder tallies with what we know of Roman Britain. Does its violence provide any clues as to when the massacre took place?
It would be tempting to suggest that it was right at the end of the Roman period when colonisation, civilization had broken down, and you're getting raiding parties from the continent, piracy, and less control from a government that's breaking down and then leaving.
At the height of the Roman period, the warring native tribes had been brought under control. Britain experienced powerful local government, rules and regulations, it had become a more complex society. Out of an unruly barbaric culture, Roman law and order had created relative peace and unity. However, around 400 AD, Roman control began to break down as the empire crumbled. Invading Saxons were arriving on the east coast of Britain. Flixton lay directly in their path. It would therefore be logical to conclude that the Flixton murders took place during this confused and hostile period of history. But what makes no sense at all is the characteristics of the burial itself.
The burial is extraordinarily shallow, and of course there are also 4 people in it. You might get 2 people in a grave, but to have 4 in one grave is extraordinarily unusual. My first impression on looking at it was that this was something rather sinister, something unexpected had happened.
We know that the ancient Britons carried out human sacrifice in times of crisis. Rather than murder, could this have been something even darker and more mysterious? A ritual killing, perhaps?
It's unlikely to have been a human sacrifice at this date. There is suggestions of that sort of thing up until the Romans take control. You can never be absolutely certain what is going on in a quiet rural district, but it wouldn't fit with a Roman society.
It's the fact that 2 of the Flixton victims were decapitated that seems to be crucial to the case. Martin wants to know whether the removal of the head was simply part of a Roman burial ritual.
Decapitation does occur in a certain kind of late Roman burial. People were decapitated after death and the head placed in the grave.
This piece of information about Roman rites and rituals is vital for Martin and may cast new light on the case.
But the head is very definitely removed and displaced.
Yes, it's usually between the knees or down by the feet. That's the common thing.
Also, ritual burials during the Roman period often contained other ceremonial trappings, such as the interment of pots and offerings along with the burials. None such artifacts were found in the Flixton grave, making this burial seem ever more puzzling. Was this a Roman ritual burial, or was something more sinister going on? Archaeologist Martin Brown is on a murder hunt in Suffolk, England. He's investigating the seemingly suspicious deaths of 4 people found one on top of the other in a shallow grave. He's found out that during the late Roman period, head removal did take place as a form of veneration and burial ceremonies. He's convinced that the unceremonial burial of the Flixton 4 smacks of something more sinister. He returns to Sue Anderson's lab to study computer graphics, which will show in more detail the exact position of body parts in the grave.
Well, this is a plan of the grave with the lowest of the 4 skeletons showing at the moment.
And that's one of the women?
Yeah, that's the older of the 2 women.
Okay.
What he's most interested in is the position of the heads. Are the heads placed between the feet, as in the burial practices of the late Roman period?
Here is the head, which is in a rather unusual position.
Yeah, it does look as if she did have a neck cut and that her head was lolling to one side when she was put in the grave.
So it's been cut but not completely severed.
That's right. Yeah.
Although in this first case the head hasn't been fully decapitated, the body appears to have been formally laid out.
She looks almost as though she's been properly laid out, but can I see some of the other bodies to see whether that follows through?
Okay, we'll have a look at the next one. He was laid more or less on top of her.
Again, the head's over. What's going on there?
Well, his head's actually face down while he's face up, so it does appear that his head's twisted over. So that again suggests that his neck wasn't completely severed, but that it had been.
The whole thing had lolled in the grave. Yeah. Okay. Building up quite a grim picture here, aren't we? What happens further up?
With the third body, again the head appears only partially decapitated, and again was definitely not placed between the knees. Also, the positioning of the bodies is beginning to look far from deliberate or careful. It does seem that it was a jumble of bones. The diagram of the 4th body convinces Martin once and for all.
Individual. and
OK.
he or she is just thrown in, more or less.
That really is turfed in, isn't it?
Yeah, and you'll be able to see it better with...
I mean, there's no ceremony or care at all there, is there?
No.
Interesting. And someone's taken enough trouble to bury them, but a precious little more than that.
Yeah, very hasty.
Martin can now rule out any notion of ritual burial. Foul play seems a more likely scenario.
This isn't what you expect as an archaeologist. The bodies haven't been laid out in nice, well-cut graves. There are no grave goods. It's a shallow grave with 3 bodies laid in and the 4th one just thrown in on top. The other thing we can say is it's probably not full-on ritual because of that business with the heads not being detached, but not being attached. I think we're being pointed towards the verdict of foul play.
Martin is now convinced that he is on a murder hunt. So where does he go from here if he's to find out why these people were killed? Radiocarbon tests have come back giving an accurate date for the killings, but creating even more of a puzzle.
We've had the carbon-14 dates, and instead of backing up the Dark Age date that we'd hoped for, they're actually pointing us earlier, into the Roman Empire. Now that creates a whole different scenario, because this isn't a period when you expect to see this sort of violent death.
The Flixton case could challenge the received perception that the Romans brought in peace and stability to Britain, since this savage act took place in the midst of a relatively civil society. The Flixton Four were neither sacrificial offerings nor victims of invading Saxons. They were most likely murdered. But the mystery remains. Why? The bones themselves may also throw up more clues. If Martin can figure out the identity of the victims, then he might be able to find out why they were murdered.
I think it's worth revisiting these skeletons, and I've come back to have another look because we're still not getting all the information from them that we could. If we can find out more about them, about how they lived, about who they were, whether they were important, all those sorts of things, and then if we can marry that to how they died, then I think we'll be somewhere down the line to finding out what their death is about, where it fits into history, and who they are. Hi, Sue.
Hi.
Sue's forensic know-how may help Martin in his search for clues as to what sort of people these were.
We know that they had a fairly hard life. We've got some evidence from both their spines that they have something which is called Schmall's nodes. If you look at these, they're actually quite big ones compared to most that you see. See them here?
Right, yes, I see.
Dimples in the vertebrae. And they run all along the spine.
That's the archaeology of a bad back, basically.
Yeah.
This accumulative wear on the spine shows that these were people who did repetitive, heavy labour. There are similar signs of wear and tear on the body of the adult male.
The man has got an interesting lesion in his elbow. You can see here this ulnar is very much enlarged compared to this one.
Such excessive bony overgrowth is a classic sign of a repetitive strain injury, or RSI, after many years of hard toil. Clearly, these people led a harsh life.
The picture that's coming through very strongly is that these are working people. They're doing hard physical labour. So if we are looking at Roman bodies, these are the people who are keeping the villas going rather than the people living in the villas themselves.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah.
If Martin can find out more about what these people did for a living, he may be able to establish a motive for their murders. He returns to the scene of the crime in search of more clues.
I'm just a matter of metres from the burial site, and as you walk across the field you can pick up handfuls, literally, of Roman pottery of the right date for our burials, and it just does make me wonder, is this a clue towards the identity of the 4 skeletons?
The existence of so much pottery on the site could be the key to understanding their deaths. Jude Pluvier has some vital information.
Well, interestingly, within a very short distance of where we found the bodies, we also found Roman pottery kilns.
At last, a picture is beginning to emerge that could tie in with the pathology on the bones that Sue pointed out. The repetitive strain injury on the elbow and the fact that the bodies were found on a pottery site lead Martin to a possible explanation as to who these people were.
The kiln could suggest that the 4 bodies we've got from Flixton are potters. And certainly if you look at the bones, these are people who lived hard lives, they did hard physical labour, and the man has got that enlarged elbow, which comes from repetitive activity, like working on a potter's wheel.
When the Romans arrived in Britain, the demand for pottery soared dramatically. Jugs, vases, pots and oil lamps were produced on a large scale. The Romans sometimes brought in potters from abroad to meet the demand. So if our victims were potters, it's quite possible that they were foreigners too.
If they are potters, that's interesting. These people are the rough end of Roman society. Not only are they itinerant, they're also regarded with suspicion. Because what they do is they take mud and they use fire to make pots. It's magical. In a world before the science that we understand, that's the sort of thing that puts you on the margins of society, if not makes you an out-and-out outsider.
An outsider in any society is vulnerable to attack for no justifiable reason. Perhaps the Flixton Four were set upon by locals, venting their prejudice in the extreme. The likely murder weapon supports this theory. Forensics confirmed that the injuries were caused by a sharp instrument. It is unlikely that a sword or dagger was used, as the Roman authorities had banned the carrying of such weapons. It is more probable that local villagers killed the Flixton Four using agricultural tools as the instruments of death.
Within a Roman province, you wouldn't be allowed as a civilian to carry weapons. So we're probably talking about something that had a domestic use. We're talking about things like knives or cleavers or scythes, iron tools that were in use.
Martin returns to the site of the grave, his journey having come full circle. He is now confident that he's been able to explain the significance of the shallow grave at Flixton.
The commonly held perception of Roman Britain is one of a time of civilization. But if we look at what the archaeology here at Flixton tells us, I think we have to recognise that sometimes that civilization is nothing more than a very, very thin veneer.
These lowly folk have come back from the grave to shed a new light on life in the early days of Roman Britain. Their terrible murder 2,000 years ago tells us, without doubt, that the peace and stability of Roman Britain could sometimes be brutally shattered.